morning. We pray that you watch over us as we go through your word, and that we rightly divide it and learn some things from Revelation, and that we can take with us and keep with us throughout our years and to teach others. In Jesus' name.
Amen. Okay, so I guess after that introduction, we may not get through Revelation 12, but we'll get a ways. Revelation 12. Last week, I want to talk about this picture. We started in this image last week. Let's take a look at Revelation 12 once again. A great sign appeared in heaven: a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. And she was with child, and she cried out, being in labor and in pain to give birth. All right, so just describe this woman that we're being shown here, just real quick. So some physical features about what John is being shown here.
Maybe.
What's that? She's pregnant.
Pregnant.
She's pregnant. Yep. How about her appearance? How is her appearance being described?
Brilliant. She's clothed with the sun.
Yes, she's clothed with the sun, and more than that too. What is under her feet? The moon. What does she have above her head? And it's a reoccurring number that we've been saying. 12 stars. And depending upon your translation, you could say she had a garland of 12 stars or a diadem. That's a crown. She was crowned with 12 stars. We talked a little bit about who this woman might represent. We talked about, well, could it be Mary? Well, first off, I think the biggest clue would be the fact that who is she pregnant with? The male child. The male child who will rule over the world with a rod of iron. So we talked about whether or not could be Mary. We talked about could it be the church that this is talked about? Could it be the nation of Israel? We talked about all those things, but I think in light of what we had read in the Old Testament, in particular in the book of Micah, that these individuals that are being talked about in the book of Micah is the remnant, the faithful remnant of God's people. And they're being described as a woman who is in labor. In Micah chapter 4 in verse 10 and chapter 5 in verse 2 and in particular, that's the passages that I was thinking about. Writhe and labor to give birth, daughter of Zion, like a woman in childbirth. In Micah chapter 5 and verse 2, but as for you, Bethlehem Ephrath, too little to be among the clans of Judah. From you, one will go forth for me to be a ruler in Israel. So from you, the remnant of God's people, and it seems that they would make sense considering that this woman is crowned with what? 12 stars. 12 stars. That number 12 being representative of God's people. Could it be the church that's being talked about here? Well, we got to remember that the church is a product of Christ. Christ is not a product of the church. Well, could it be Mary? Well, we don't have any place in Scripture that describes the church as being the offspring of Mary, but is the church, of course, which is the spiritual descendants of Israel. Could it be that the church is indeed the offspring of the faithful in Israel, just as Christ is the offspring of the faithful of Israel? Well, let's take a look at that as we're moving on, because we're showing something else in Revelation 12. Revelation 12, in verse 3 says, "Then another sign appeared in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his heads were 7 diadems." In other words, 7 crowns. "And his tail swept away a third of the stars and threw them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she gave birth, he might devour her child." I think we started talking last week about this dragon. This is one of the few times that the book of Revelation gives us an image, gives us some sort of figure, and tells us specifically what the figure is. What does the Bible tell us that this figure is? I want us to look at verse 9. The great dragon was thrown down, the serpent of old, who is called the devil and Satan. Okay, this is one of these instances where we don't have to speculate on the images that are being used. Describe the dragon. Describe the dragon, because again, these numbers that we're seeing over and over, it's being repeated once again, and the same sort of figures as well. Describe the dragon.
7 heads and 10 horns.
Yes.
7 crowns upon
7 heads. Okay. What numbers are we seeing here? The number 7. The number 10. Of course, we talked about these numbers being representative of completeness, of totality. He has 7 heads. What would you think about it? What do you think about a creature with 7 heads? You give yourself, I don't know, 8 brains. Is the devil smart? Is he wise?
Yes.
And cunning?
Yes.
Yes. What else does he have? He has horns on his head. We talked about in the past how the horns is representative of power. In the book of Daniel, in particular, we'll go there in just a moment. The creatures that are shown to Daniel too, they also have multiples of horns being representative of how powerful they are. Some horns were big, some horns were little, some horns were broken. All these things are representative of power. But again, we see here that this dragon, he had 7 heads and he had 10 horns. 10 horns. This number 10 being of completeness. And he had 7 crowns on his head. The crowns being representative of authority, of power. What does this tell us about the devil? Just think about just a few images. What does this tell us about him?
He's powerful and
He is.
ferocious.
Is he? Yes. Is he powerful? Is he strong? Think about the crowns. Does he rule?
It could it be the kingdoms of the world over which he rules?
Could be. There's some passages I was thinking of that other passages in the New Testament that describes the devil. Okay, so in 1 Peter chapter 5 in verse 8, "Be of sober spirit, be on the alert. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour." Is this red dragon dangerous?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Is he cunning? Yes. Is there a reason for him to wear crowns? What does the New Testament say about the devil? 1 John chapter 5 and verse 15. Or verse 19 rather. "We know that we are of God, and that the whole world lies in the power of the evil one." Does the devil have rule and authority and power over the wicked?
Yes.
Yeah. Ephesians chapter 2 and verse 1. You were dead in your trespasses and sins in which you formerly walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air, of the spirit that is now working in the sons of disobedience. 2 Corinthians chapter 4 and verse 4. The God of this world has blinded the minds of the unbelieving. Who does the devil rule over?
All non-believers.
That's right. That's right. But, Romans chapter 6. Romans chapter 6 talks about being slavery and obedience and all these sort of things. You know, people that do not subject themselves to the will of God, they are slaves of the evil one. He is ruler in our life, in their lives. A lot of people think, I'm my own man. Nobody rules over me. Nobody tells me what to do. The Bible tells us that somebody tells you what to do. You just get to choose who tells you what to do. So you're either going to be righteousness or going to be wickedness. Pick one. And the devil, he is powerful. He is powerful. He's nothing to be played with. He's not a cartoon caricature like so many people try to make him out to be today. He is in the fact that he has 10 heads or 7 heads and 10 horns, seven crowns. This being is the ultimate in evil. Wendy.
You just used the word crown on the dragons, but I was doing a little research, and there's a distinction between the word crown and diadem. Crown represents a permanent victory, where a diadem just represents the ruling authority and power. And I think that that's a big distinction between these two figures, both crowned with something on their heads, but meaning different things. In this case, it comes from the Greek. I think the Greek word is diadema. Yeah, and then synonymous is the word for the crown.
Yeah. The only time that I've run across this word is in the sense of diadema. But that's an interesting point.
Yeah, I only found it in Revelations, the diadem word.
Yeah. But either way, he's wearing something that is representative of his power and his capabilities. It says in verse 4 that his tail swept away a third of the stars of heaven and threw them to the earth. That's kind of strange. Do you think that means anything? Yeah.
The fallen angels.
We're going to be talking about a war that is going on in heaven in this chapter, and a lot of people like to do. We know a lot of people like to do a lot of things with what we're about to be talking about, but as far as the stars. And his tail sweeping away the stars of heaven. There were some other passages from the Old Testament, and I had the question: what is the devil doing with his tail? What is he doing with the tail? He's sweeping away the stars of heaven, and oftentimes in the Old Testament, stars are representative of people. They're representative of people. And it says with his tail, what is he doing? He is knocking the stars down to the earth. He's bringing them low.
To me, I think maybe this is pointing out his power.
Yes. Yeah, that's the overall point. You're right about that.
His complete lack of humanity and just
That that is a good point.
It's set on destruction.
That is a good point. From what is his head? That's a. I'm glad that you brought that up. What is he doing with his head right now? He's waiting to devour. He's waiting to destroy. What is he doing with his tail? Still destroying from head to tail. We have this being that his ultimate goal is not for good. His ultimate goal is for wickedness, and we see the same sort of imagery used in Isaiah chapter 9. In Isaiah chapter 9, speaking of God's insolent people, he says, in verse 13, it says, "Yet the people do not turn back to him who struck them, nor do they seek the Lord of hosts." But look at verse 14. "So the Lord cuts off head and tail from Israel, both palm and bulrush in a single day. The head is the elder and an honorable man, and the prophet who teaches falsehood is the tail." So we have a situation here where these individuals, of course, they're being described from head to tail, being the summation of all people, from the good to the wicked. But in this case, the tail is being representative of what? False prophets, false teachers, and we're going to see as we continue in the book of Revelation, the fact that false doctrine, false teaching, false prophets cause people to fall, cause people to become destroyed and fall into the wrath of God. And again, we can see in the Old Testament too, in Daniel chapter 8. In Daniel chapter 8, we talked a little bit about these horns and what these creatures mean. If anybody remembers our study from Daniel chapter 8, some creatures are being described here, and as the main discussion that's going on in the book of Daniel is talking about the rise and fall of earthly kingdoms that is going to come after Babylon. In particular, the Medo-Persians and the Greek empires, of course, followed after by the Roman Empire. But in Daniel chapter 8 talks about the vision of the male goat, and this goat is representative of Greece, and the crowns, or not the crowns, the horns of this goat being representative of the rulers of this goat. In Daniel chapter 8, verse 8, then the male goat magnified himself exceedingly. But as soon as he was mighty, the large horn was broken, and in its place there came up 4 conspicuous horns toward the 4 winds of heaven. And out of one of them came forth a rather small horn, which grew exceedingly great toward the south, toward the east, and toward the beautiful land. And look at verse 10. It grew up to the host of heaven and caused some of the host and some of the stars to fall to the earth. And it trampled them down. That's very similar to what we read in Revelation 12. That these stars are going to be representative of people set in high places. Who are these people set in the high places? Well, in Daniel chapter 8, we're actually Daniel was given the interpretation of this image, of this goat. We can look at verse 21 concerning the interpretation of the vision that he saw. The shaggy goat represents the kingdom of Greece. Okay, again, one of these times when we're given an image and we're told specifically what these things are. And the large horn that is between his eyes is the first king. The broken horn and the 4 horns that arose in its place represents 4 kingdoms which will arise from his nation, although not with his power. In the latter period of their rule, when the transgressors have run their course, a king will arise, insolent and skilled in intrigue. and his power will be mighty, but not by his own power. And he will destroy to an extraordinary degree, and prosper and perform his will. He will destroy mighty men and the holy people. And again, this this horn that grew up to the heavens, that caused some of the stars to fall to the earth. In the interpretation of this vision, what are the stars? The mighty men and holy people. Think about this in Revelation. Is the devil able, with his tail, is he able to cause some holy people to fall? Absolutely. Absolutely. Why? What does the Bible tell us about the devil? What does Jesus tell us about Satan? John chapter 8. John chapter 8, verse 44. He tells the Pharisees of his day, he said, You are of your father the devil, and you want to do the desires of your father. He was a murderer from the beginning. He was a murderer from the beginning. From the beginning. I can go to the book of Genesis, and I don't see anywhere where the devil, that old serpent, murdered somebody. But did he? Did he? Yeah. Well, both physically and spiritually too. And how did he accomplish this? He lied to them, and they believed the lie. The devil is able to knock down holy people if they would believe lies and false prophecy. The devil is powerful, and he is cunning.
Again, it comes back to not just the powerful people, but it comes back to us.
Yes.
Yeah. We may think we're powerful. We may think we have the power over the devil, that we're not going to let him get a hold of us. But you're having to watch 7 heads and a tail. Mm-hmm. You can't do that at all times. You might be trying to watch head number 4, head number 3, and the tail's going to come around and get you. You're constantly having to watch around you.
Yes. Is that and I've been thinking about these numbers in the sense of how they're representative in other places, in the sense of but you're right. But in the sense of completeness, in the sense of fullness, we're dealing with a powerful being, and that's the overall point. That's the overall point. And what is this powerful being doing? He is waiting for this child to be born so that he might devour the child. Why?
The child represents Christ.
That's right. Because the devil knows that if he can destroy Christ, or if he can stop his coming about, from the beginning, the devil, his intentions has always been to thwart the plans of God and to bringing about the Christ. He's used all sorts of things, from lying to persecution to all these things. I mean, even when Jesus was born, even after he was born, remember the case with Herod, and Herod wanted to kill all of the male children 2 years old and younger. Why? In order to destroy the Christ. The devil has wanted to destroy the Christ, but it says again in verse 4 that his tail swept away a third of the stars, threw them to the earth. The dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she gave birth, he might devour her child. And then she gave birth to a son, a male child, who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. And her child was caught up to God and his throne. So this male child who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. And the second Psalm in verse 7. I will surely tell of the decree of the Lord. He said to me, "You are my son. Today I have begotten you. ask of me, and I will surely give the nation as your inheritance to the very ends of the earth as your possession, and you shall break them with a rod of iron. You shall shatter them like earthenware. We're given the imagery of the Christ in Revelation chapter 19, actually, verse 15. From his mouth comes a sharp sword, that with it he might strike down the nations, and he will rule them with a rod of iron. Obviously, we're talking about the Christ here. So did the woman give birth to the child? Well, yes. But it says what happened to him. That he was caught up to God and his throne. Is Jesus on his throne? Yes. And yes, and even today. Even today, and all the premillennialists that are still looking for a coming kingdom, always have to ask: Is God, or is Jesus, is he King of Kings and Lord of Lords right now? Does he rule on his throne right now? If we are still looking for a coming kingdom, what kingdom is he ruler of then? What kingdom is he ruler? He is on his throne now. And then the woman fled into the wilderness where she had a place prepared by God, that there she would be nourished for 1,260 days. 1,260 days. We look at that number. That number doesn't mean anything to us. You know, it's not tens, it's not 12s, it's not sevens. What is that?
Half a seven.
Half a seven what? You're exactly right. Because we've seen this number before, the 3.5, and what is 3.5 in relation to 7? It's exactly half. We're going to see all these days, 42 months. What is 42 months? Again, 3.5 years. If the number 7, represents a completeness or a fullness, in this case, a fullness of time. Whenever you're talking about halves, this 3.5, it's not a complete period of time. It's going to be temporary, for a temporary period of time. And where did this woman, which we had talked about being the spiritual remnant, where did she go? She went to the wilderness, right? Remember. Throughout the Old Testament, whenever there's a period of destruction, whenever there's a period of war or persecution, where do people oftentimes go? They went out to the wilderness. In Jeremiah chapter 48, in verse 6, concerning the fall of Moab, the instruction to them is flee, save your lives, that you may be like juniper in the wilderness. What's a juniper? Yeah, it's a tree. Be trees in the wilderness. In Matthew chapter 24, Jesus is talking about the coming destruction of Jerusalem. He says, therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation which is spoken of through Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place, let the reader understand, then those who are in Judea must flee to the mountains. In other words, you need to go out into the wilderness. And that's where people stayed. That's where people remained until whatever problems was over. Then they were able to return. But the wilderness was a place of safety. Brother Tim.
Yeah. So couldn't in a way the woman, and I've read this in a commentary, represent God's family from the Old Testament and New Testament? Because
well, now, go ahead.
If you look at it, in the sense that what's happening is, the dragon here, his, the heads are in front of the woman as if, he's getting ready to attack her. Meaning that the devil will always be on the attack of God's family. And the tail, sweeping away the stars, his tail sweeping away the stars in the sky, kind of represent, basically fallen churches or congregations, false teachers. They've fallen into the hands of false teachers, and they are being destroyed. And you know, and just like I said, the woman, you know, she takes off and go into the wilderness. Well, people in God's family, God's church, we have protection. I mean, that's how you, I mean, when you come into the church, there's your protection. You know, Christ is your protection now. So, I mean, I just, like I said.
Well, when the woman went out into the wilderness that we see here, she fled to the wilderness, and God provided for her for how long? For 3.5 years. It was a temporary a period of time. Before we get too far in this, in relation to the church of the first century, what is being represented here? Things that have already happened. Because remember, it's talking about here the devil that was awaiting to devour the male child, Jesus Christ. But we see here that he was taken up into heaven, and now he sits on his throne. How do you relate that to the fact that in chapter 1 and verse 1 and 3 that the things that are being shown are things that are shortly to come to pass, that are things that are soon to happen? If we are shown things that had already happened, well, what's the deal here?
Well, I think
go ahead.
I think it's just like you said.
Thought question.
For the 7 churches of Asia, what's at stake here is that they know that the church is going to come become upon a path. Mm-hmm. And for the Roman soldiers or anyone, that
went on in heaven, which I think is what it's talking about is the heavenly places in the spiritual realm, and the fact that this dragon was defeated and he was thrown down. Why? Because of the death of Christ. The death of Christ. We'll talk about this next week. The death of Christ robbed Satan of his power. It has thrown him down. There is no longer room for him in the heavenly places. But again, all of this stuff was brought about by the death of Jesus Christ. The death of Jesus Christ is what gives victory. But again, if the images that are being shown are things that are soon to pass, why is the church being shown things that have already happened? Context. Yeah, very good. Yes, we have we'll see this in movies. We'll see how they do flashbacks in movies. Why do they have flashbacks? To give context to present. And sometimes that needs to happen. These first century Christians, they're being shown things that are going on in the heavenly realm, in the spiritual places, and they need to know what it is that they are up against. Moreover, they need to be rest assured that they are going to be given victory, and it's through Jesus Christ that these first century Christians are given victory. But is Satan completely defeated? Is he completely gone? Is he still at work today?
Yeah.
And that's what these Christians need to be told. Satan, you still have somebody that is against you. There is going to be a time when he is going to be completely defeated. But as of right now, he is on this earth, and he is after the offspring of the faithful remnant of Israel. He is after the offspring of the woman, those who keep the commandments of God and the testimony of Jesus Christ. He is after them, and he was after the woman. But did God provide for the woman? Well, sure. The faithful remnant of Israel. We'll talk about this next week. We're out of time. I wanted to talk about the fact that the Apostle Paul in the book of Romans talked much about Israel, and he talked much about the fact that God has not abandoned his people, and what's the proof of that? because Paul was one of them. Paul was one of them. But again, all that was brought about by those who remained faithful to doing the will of God, and Paul was one of those faithful of Israel. Okay, thank you for your attention. We did.